Good morning, Monco. We are here for our online Sunday school, adult Sunday school, and I guess actually I shouldn't be saying just good morning because this is being recorded now and it's going to be placed, hopefully, if everything works well, on YouTube, and I'm sure it will work well. Then I should be saying maybe this afternoon, good afternoon to some people, and good evening, because the great thing about what we're doing here now is that people are going to be able to go back and watch this. And people who, some of you are probably watching it now at around 9 o'clock on Sunday, March 29th, but others are going to be able to go back and watch it later. And I think that's great because even though I can't do this the way I would normally do the Sunday school with your interaction and your insight, which I really love so much, and it really adds so much to the class, just being able to have this out there for you to watch later, also for others to watch it beyond just our Sunday school class that normally attend at Monco, and even greater than that, people out there who might just pick up the link and see it and watch it, and it's really going to be used by the Lord to minister in a lot different way than it would have been if we were just live. So we're here. It's certainly a different time with the whole Corona situation, and I'm kind of homebound, and everybody is. So we're just going to play it this way, probably do it for the next few weeks and see how it goes. Um, you know what? My son actually is sitting right behind me, and I do want to give a special shout out. And I don't like using that word shout out. That sounds like I'm trying to be cool, but I do want to know Josh. He's back there on the floor. You can't see him, but he is the genius that put all this together. He showed me how to do it. He made it very user friendly. So we're just going to roll. So thank you very much, Josh. And also thank you even to my other children, Charity, Chloe, Christian, because they were a lot of technological experts to kind of talk to me about different ways I could do it. Because I really wanted to do this interactive at first, but they kind of led me the right way. And then, of course, most of all, I want to thank my wife, Chelsea, because she really prompted me to see the significance of what we're doing here and see the broader picture. So let's just get started. We're going to be looking at, there we go, perfect. We have been doing a biblical survey. So theme of what we're doing is a Bible survey, looking at the bigger picture of Scripture. So by that I mean, when we're going through these books, we're not going verse by verse or precept by precept. We're just kind of giving an overall understanding of the theme of what these books are about, and just getting some understanding as a class. And it has been excellent, and it kind of parallels what's being done on Wednesday nights with Pastor Tony as he's going through the Old Testament. Now, it's my purpose here to go through the entire Bible. So, just to give you an idea, if you see this Bible overview here, um, the books of the Bible aren't really just randomly put there. They're there for a logical reason. Obviously, first, it was given by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and it was given in a way that God used these men to write these books. But just the way they've been put together, as you see the first five books right there. And we've gone through these already, the Pentateuch. That term Pentateuch, a lot of you are probably familiar with, is the Greek term, penta meaning five, tuch means scrolls. So you got five scrolls or five books. Those are the first five books of the Bible. You're talking about what you know also in the Hebrew as the Torah or the Torah, right? And of course, you know it as the law. So we've gone through all of those. And when we went through them, we got an understanding of what each book means and also how each of those books really relate to us in an overall way, just in our walk with the Lord. We've gone through the historical books you see right there. Those 12 books, starting with Joshua, going all the way down to Esther. Last time we did the book of Psalms, and just to kind of remind everybody where we were, and especially for those who may not have been with us, um, when we did the book of Psalms, we tried to break it down and understand how it can be laid out in an outline. And it could be challenging because there are a lot of Psalms, but one of the things we really focused on was that you can break it down into those five books you see as the blue going across there. And we broke it down in a way where those first five books of the Bible that we already spoke about, they relate to each book of the Psalms, meaning from chapter 1 through 41, all those Psalms in there have a theme related to creation. And that's kind of like the Genesis book of Psalms, if you follow what I'm saying. Book 2, chapter 43, Psalm 43, 42, I'm sorry, through 72 is the Exodus books, and a lot of the Psalms there are related to deliverance and crying out to God. Um, that's supposed to say loose ends there. It says loose ends, but it says loose. What that is a section we do sometimes where it's something we may have left out the week before. And as we talked about praying the Psalms, and we talked about it being musical and lyrical poetry or lyric poetry, the one thing we didn't talk about is actually singing the Psalms and what they mean. And I'm going to refer to something like that a little later, but look at this quote here. It says, music stirs our hearts and engages our souls in ways we can't describe. And that quote is so amazing because if you're into music, even if you're not, music does something to us. And it can bring us joy, it can bring us happiness, it can create a celebratory environment. It can also kind of bring us down, it can relax us, it can give us to a sense of peace, it can take us to a sense of depression. And we have a lot of songs that we like, and a lot of you know these songs, and they stir something in us, and they bring back memories, and they just bring up good times, and some takes us into deep thought and everything. And if songs like these, and you may have some slightly different than these, but if songs like these can do that, then what more could a song that really has God in it, that has His Word in it, that talks about His power, His majesty, His grace, and that's what the Psalms really are. And I'm going to get into that as we wrap things up at the end. But let's just kind of move along to what we're doing, not on O Day, but on Today. So we're doing the wisdom literature. As I said, Proverbs are the first of the books of wisdom that are part of those books of poetry that are written by Solomon. Uh, that doesn't say can proverb, it says African proverb. You know what? Let me see if I can, maybe this will work. Let's change things up on you. See that? See how I'm getting all technological here? I went to the other side, so now you can see what it says. All right, so a lot of these proverbs, you probably know. The Asian one, give a man a fish and he eats for a day. A lot of us have heard that before. All that glitters is not gold. Laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Certainly, the tree is known by its fruit, the African proverb there. It certainly makes sense. And then this is the interesting one at the bottom. An army of sheep led by a lion would defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. That's really interesting. It certainly makes sense. The leadership, and if it's strong, it makes a lot of sense. This was said by Cervantes, right? A proverb is a short sentence based on long experience. And that really encapsulates it very well. Because that's what all those African proverbs were you saw, and not just African, but all the ones from all the cultures. And the question that it kind of begs is what is the difference between what you see on the left here, these sayings, these ones that are very common, and the proverbs you know from scripture. And see, the difference is this: all of them make sense. They use a lot of common sense. They can teach you some things. Our life are probably better if we live our lives according to that. But the difference is that that's good advice. This on the right is godly advice. And that's the difference. This is from a realm that's much more wise than we can know. And Solomon has culled these and put them together just for our benefit through the Holy Spirit. So here we go. So we got our five books, right? We're taking out the wisdom book and we're looking at this book of Proverbs today. And as we look at it, we're going to go through the same kind of breakdown that we did with Psalms last time, where some of these books, like, a lot of people look at Proverbs and it seems like it's very difficult to outline it because it just seems like the Proverbs are just coming one after another from all over the place. And how do you categorize it? And you can do it in a lot of different ways, even thematically. But if you look at how this is laid out across the top there, it's really just outlined based on the almost, I wouldn't say chronological, but as you go through the chapters. So let's see what I'm talking about. You got the purpose and the theme that's done in that first little section there. That's really the first 7 verses, because Proverbs is very clear in this prologue what it's about. Look at the purpose and look at these verbs here: to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the words of understanding, to receive instruction, to give prudence or direction to the simple, right? To increase in learning, to understand the words of the wise. It's very clear what the purpose of it is as Solomon begins to pen this letter. So we're going to take a look to get an introduction. This is going to be something from the Bible Project, which a lot of you who are in Sunday school know we use often. And if you're not familiar with it, the Bible Project is excellent. You can go on YouTube, just Google Bible Project. They have a summary of every book in the Bible, themes in the Bibles, doctrines in the Bibles, and they really break it down visually very well. So let's look at this one and Lady Wisdom.
There are 3 books in the Bible that have come to be called the wisdom literature: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job.
And all of these books are addressing the same set of questions. What kind of world are we living in? And what does it look like to live well in this world?
So, how to be good at life.
Yeah. So each of these books tackles these questions from a unique perspective, and it's important to understand all of them to get a fully biblical perspective on the good life. So as a thought experiment, you could actually imagine each of these books as a person. So Proverbs would be like this brilliant young teacher, and Ecclesiastes the sharp middle-aged critic, and Job would be this weathered old man who's seen a lot in his day.
We're going to start by meeting the book of Proverbs, the brilliant young teacher. And she's not just smart, she's smart about everything: work, relationships, sex, spirituality. She has incredible insights, things you wouldn't see on your own.
Yeah, she would be the perfect friend to have around when you need really specific advice.
So what makes her so smart?
Well, Proverbs can see things that most people don't see. She believes that there's an invisible creative force in the universe that can guide people in how they should live. And you can't see it, just like you can't see gravity, but it affects everything that we do.
So what's this force?
Well, in Hebrew, it's called chokhmah, and it usually gets translated into English as wisdom. It's an attribute of God that God used to create the world. And chokhmah has been woven into the fabric of things and how they work. So wherever people are making good or just or wise decisions, they're tapping into chokhmah.
And whenever someone's making a bad decision, they're working against chokhmah.
Right, or as it says in Proverbs chapter 1, the waywardness of fools will destroy them, but the one who listens to wisdom lives in security.
So it's like a moral law of the universe.
Yeah, it's a cause-effect pattern, and no one can escape it. And Proverbs personifies all of this as a woman.
Yeah, Lady Wisdom.
Right, and she roams around the earth, calling out, making herself available to anyone who's willing to listen to her and to learn. Which leads to the second thing Proverbs believes, that anyone can access and interact with wisdom and use it to make a beautiful life for yourself or for others.
You can create with it like a designer.
Yes, in fact, chokhmah in Hebrew isn't simply intellectual knowledge. The word is also used to describe a skilled artisan who excels at their craft, like woodworking or stonemasonry. So you show you possess chokhmah when you put it to work and develop the skill of making a good life.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's do this. Let's go find some wisdom.
But before you do, Proverbs has one more really important thing to consider. Chokhmah isn't some impersonal force. It's an attribute of God himself. And so in Hebrew thought, your journey to becoming wise has to begin with what Proverbs calls the fear of the Lord. It's this healthy respect for God's definition of good and evil. And true wisdom means learning those boundary lines and not crossing them.
Remember when it ended, it said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. When you see the rest of the verse, now that's from actually it's written twice in Proverbs. It's written in chapter 9, and the thing that's interesting about it is that the fear of the Lord is the key to why we don't have this wisdom, this godly wisdom that He yearns so much for us to have. If you look at it here, it's written in a little different format. The fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. So if it doesn't make sense about the understanding, when you understand and when you begin to um, just embrace what God is giving us here through His Word, through Proverbs, through the wisdom that's there, you're going to have good judgment. That's going to affect your life. The fear of the Lord, because a lot of people, I've even heard people in the pulpit defend it all kind of ways. And here it is. First of all, it's not this. It's not this cringing, terrifying fear of this being up there and what he's going to do, like you would see in the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy and the lion certainly and even Toto are cringing in fear because the guy's back there pushing smoke machines and explosions and silence and he's yelling and all. It's not that. And that's how a lot of people see God. You know what is really more akin to? Joseph. Here's a picture that represents what happened with Joseph in Egypt, right? Joseph, if you remember Genesis, is sold out by his brothers. He goes into slavery. But because of the grace of the Lord, the favor that was on his life, and his sense of commitment to God, what you wind up having is Joseph being in Potiphar's house, right? And Potiphar was essentially almost like the right hand man to Pharaoh. He was up there. And Joseph is running all of this, right? And then Joseph is seen by Potiphar's wife. And Joseph is young, and the Bible describes him as good looking and well built, kind of like a young Charles Foster, a stud, like, me. And when he sees that, sorry, when she sees that, she wants him. And she's a rich woman, very powerful because of who her husband is, and is probably used to getting what she wants. And it talks about how she came after him day after day after day. But what he was able to do is he was able to resist her. He was able to resist her because of his commitment to the Lord, meaning, one point, just like the picture says, when she's trying to convince him to lie with him, to essentially have sex with him, right? He says, I can't do this because of what your husband has done. He's put his trust in me. He's given me full run of his household. There's nothing that I can't do that I don't have the freedom to do here. But then he goes on to say, how could I do this thing in sin in the sight of God? He doesn't say, how could I do to this guy that really hooked me up like this? That wouldn't be right, all he's given me. He sees ultimately it's about him and God. And see, that's what the fear of the Lord is really about. See, on the side where you see the Wizard of Oz, what that's really about is that's a fear of what he'll do to us, right? The one with Joseph is a fear about what I'll do to him, meaning the Wizard of Oz, they're afraid because that guy behind that curtain is going to hurt us. He sounds angry. And that's how a lot of people see God. Joseph, his whole thing is, I don't want to hurt him because the way I care about him. And that's that sense of reverence. That's what the fear of the Lord is really about. He's powerful and we respect him in a very listen to me. You know what I'm saying? I got to go through my Porky Pig stuff. Um, we really revere who he is, but there's a sense of love and commitment there too. And that's what the fear of the Lord is about. And if you don't have that fear, then you're going to reject Lady Wisdom. And look at this scripture here in the very first chapter. Three types of people that are kind of laid out in Proverbs that are listed in one statement here. How long will you, number one, simple ones, will you love simplicity? Number two, for scorners, right? Delight in their scorning. And number three, fools hate knowledge. So you got the simple one, the scorner, and the fool. And if you kind of rearrange those a little bit, it's almost a progression of your rejection of God, your rejection of his wisdom. So let's look at the simple one. This is the person who's gullible, who's naive, who often lacks experience, which sometimes we do equate with a young person, because that often is the case. The young person hasn't had that experience yet, and they can be very naive. But this person still is rejecting wisdom. And let me show you why. The biblical example I have here is Samson. Now, you remember Samson, right? With Samson and his scenario with Delilah, right? She's trying to get to the key of the secret of his strength, right? So you know what she does if you've read the account before. She's kind of wearing him down. Samson, please tell me the secret of your strength. So three times he tells her something that's not true. And three times she tries to trick him. First time, what he says, you have to get these cords that are not dry, that are still wet. And when you bind me in those, I won't be able to break. And that's the key to my strength, right? So she does that, ties him up, gets the Philistines there. Samson, wake up. The Philistines here to take you. He breaks right through the cord because that's not the secret of his strength, right? Next time, get I think it's 7 cords, right? Wrap them up, and then same thing. Samson, Philistines are here to take you. He breaks right through them. Samson, why do you keep doing this? I'm trying to get your secret of your strength. Wouldn't you think Samson by now, like, what's up with this babe? You know what I mean? Like, she keeps saying this stuff, and there are Philistines waiting around where he sleeps to take him, and he still doesn't figure it out. You know why? Because it's not even about lacking experience in this case. He just intentionally being gullible because he has less fear of the Lord and he has more love for this woman and what she's giving him. And then, of course, and he does it one more time where he says, braid my head in with the loom and the web, and does that. Samson and Philistines are here, and then finally he does tell her the secret of my strength is my hair. I'm a Nazarite from birth. Shave it off, and then she shaves it off, and that's when he has his fall. And by the way, he didn't lose his strength because she gave him a haircut right there. He lost his strength because of all the compromise that was building up. The word says that when he tried to break at that point, that the Lord had left him. And that's what it's more about. But that's someone who is a simple one, Samson. You look at the fool, doesn't know the difference between, I'm sorry, knows the difference between right and wrong, but simply doesn't care. Thinks their sin is no big deal, repeats the same mistake again and again and again. And I gave that example of the kings of Judah that we talked about after Solomon, and we talked about how eventually Israel was split. You had so many evil kings. You had a few sprinkles, Josiah and everything that was sprinkled into the good kings. But for the most part, these guys did the same thing over and over again and didn't care. Prophets coming to them, telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing. I don't care. It's no big deal. I know that happened before, but I'm going to be different. And I kind of chose Zedekiah there, Zedediah there because he was the last king of Judah before they were captured by and taken into by Babylon and taken into captivity. And it just symbolizes everything about a fool. You know what you're doing is wrong, but you don't care. You don't even think about the consequences. And he found in a big way what the consequences were, as his people were taken off, and his homeland was essentially burnt down to the ground, including the temple. You got the scorner, and like I said, these are levels of progression. You got the simple one there who just kind of gullible about it and just does it and doesn't realize, even though they should realize it. You got the fool who's doing it and doesn't care. And now you got the scorner or the mocker who just openly mocks others for doing the right thing. So he's just not content with doing his thing. And I don't care what you think. I'm going to do so much that what you're doing right, I'm going to belittle it. I'm going to mock it. Matter of fact, I'm going to be bent on trying to convert you to my evil ways. And the perfect example of that is Satan. That's his MO. He is the accuser. He's the one that wants to, knowing already what his fate is, he's trying to take many people as possible with him. And he's going to try to convince you that what you're doing is wrong. He mocked, starting in the garden, if you think about it. Did God really say that? Eve, God didn't say that. God knows you go over here and take that fruit, he knows you're going to be just like him. And he puts some doubt there. And then he eventually says, like, nothing's going to happen to you. Take a bite. And he wants to pull as many people down to his level as possible. That's what a scorner does. When you look at the opposite of it, you see the wise man or the wise person. This is not, when it says wise man, we're talking about any believer who wants to know God and wants to know and understand and really grasp his wisdom. Look at the words in the bold there. The person who hears. It's one thing to just have words going past. It's another thing to really hear and listen. Jesus said, those who have ears to hear. And here's the other thing, what it says, increase in learning. And see, that's interesting because a lot of people will say, especially when it comes to Proverbs, because, we're going to talk about it shortly, how, you can read a proverb every day, but there are a lot of people who are like, well, I read that before. But then you're not a wise person because the wise person already has wisdom, often already has understanding of things, but wants more and wants to increase in it. So therefore, they're going to seek even more. That's what true wisdom is about. Let's take a look at this comparison here: the wise versus the fool. So I'm just temporarily eliminating the scorner on one end and the simpleton or the simple person on the other end, because that word fool in Hebrew is used something like 40 something times in the book of Proverbs. It's talked about more than any of the others because I think that's where more of us are. And God knows that. I mean, there are certainly a lot of scorners here, but they're kind of on the fringes. The naive person hopefully eventually can grow out of that, hopefully. But a lot of us are fools. And by the way, this has nothing to do with age. When I gave that example of the simple person being a young person, um, that that can be true because they haven't lived a lot. But wise people, if they embrace the Lord, if they're open to things, they can become very wise. On the other hand, there's a lot of old people. Don't just assume because somebody's old with a gray beard that they have a lot of wisdom, because there's a lot of old fools out there. I don't mean their intellect. I'm talking about you ain't gonna tell me nothing. That person has no desire to learn anything. And let's take a look here. We're gonna do a little video clip. So we got two different scenarios. A lot of you probably recognize that imagery of the guy sitting on the bench because it's from a mainstream movie. And by the way, I do use often, if you're not familiar with our class, some clips that are clean, no profanity or, anything inappropriate from secular movies. And that's not to say that I or Michael Bible Fellowship or Pastor Tony is promoting this movie. I'm just kind of saying that as a background thing, but we can learn from it. Jesus used what was around him to teach. So they were in a farming culture, he used that. We're in a technological culture, so we're using some of this. So let's take a look at Forrest Gump. Notice how people refer to him. Notice how he reacts at the end of his life in comparison to that lower image that some of you may have seen just more recently.
What are you, stupid or something? Are you retarded or just plain stupid?
Are you stupid or something?
Are you crazy or just plain stupid?
These are gonna make you
And next to Mama, no one ever talked to me or asked me questions.
Are you stupid or something?
Mama says stupid as stupid does.
I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying. We've been waiting for Miami spring break for a while. About 2 months we've had this trip planned. 3 months. So we're just out here having a good time. Whatever happens, happens.
Like, it's really messing up with my spring break. What is there to do here other than go to the bars or the beach, and they're closing all of it? It's really messing up. I think they're blowing it way out of proportion. I think it's doing way too much.
Doing us bad. We need a refund. This virus ain't that serious. It's serious. It's more serious things out there like hunger and poverty, and we need to address that.
Yeah, I mean, we planned this a long time ago, and it was kind of up in the air if we still go, but like we're here. I just turned 21 this year, so I'm here to party, so it's kind of disappointing, but we're just making the most of it. We met these other people in our little Airbnb spot, so we're just hanging out with them and trying to get drunk before everything closes.
I mean, it sucks, but we're gonna make the best of it. We're enjoying ourselves. It sucks, and I'm from New Orleans, so this really sucks. However, we're gonna enjoy ourselves. We having day parties all day. It's my birthday, St. Patrick's Day. Turn up.
We're just trying to roll with we're just living for the moment. We're just gonna do what happens when it happens. When stuff closes, we're gonna do it when it closes. But besides that, we're just trying to have the best trip we can.
You have to do the best with what God gave you.
What's my destiny, Mom?
You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself. Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest. You never know what you're gonna get.
Mama always had a way of explaining things so I could understand them.
I will miss you, Forrest.
She had got the cancer and died on a Tuesday. I bought her a new hat with little flowers on it.
All right. So very interesting clip. What's interesting about that is that a lot of people, if they watch the movie Forrest Gump, or let's say the people in the movie with him, the people that he encounters. You can look at him because he's a little slow. I don't know if most of you have seen this movie. I mean, it's a pretty, well-known movie, so I'm assuming a lot of people have seen it that are looking at this now. But there'll be a lot of people that say like, that guy's dense. He's a little slow. That guy's a fool. Because you think of a fool as just like, duh, like that guy. But he's not the fool. You can see a clear contrast there to who's the wise person and who's the fool. Because Forrest Gump, they keep asking him in the beginning, is he stupid or what? But then you see at the end of his life, at the end of his mother's life, because that's Sally Field, his mother, on her deathbed essentially, she's saying certain things to him. And if you've seen the movie, she's been a guide through him throughout. He's been wise enough to accept instruction, I'm sorry, accept instruction from his mother, which is what the definition of a wise person is. He's able to use these things. He's not even a simpleton. You would think, as naive as he comes across, you don't see him just being tricked and people putting cons over him the whole movie. Actually, you know what you see? He has all kind of amazing favor. Think about the situations, if you've seen the movie, and the places he's been placed in. And he's just somebody who's very humble, and in contrast to even the people around him. The shrimp guy, with Bubba, right? Bubba is not really ever content with where he is now. Everything is about what he's going to do in the future with the shrimp this and the shrimp that. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. His wife, who has a lot for a very attractive woman and everything, but is always trying to please people and be something with all the endeavors she gets into that she probably never was supposed to be. And we may even get back to that when we do Hosea, if some of you know what I'm talking about. But when you contrast that and the way Forrest Gump is, even at the end of his life, when she just simply said, well, he asked her first, how do I know what my destiny is? What's my purpose here? That's a very humble person going to someone who he sees as much wiser. And with all the flaws she has in that movie, she kind of represents that to him. And then you have her just simply saying, you got to do the best with what God gave you. And that's the attitude. That's the perfect attitude of a wise person. And you compare it to the fools that you saw on that beach. Now, I know they aren't there now because they've basically been run off of it. And I know some of them were there before the corona thing really hit. But here's the thing, they're already saying that you need to have some space. And just look at the picture there. That's the definition of a fool. I don't care what they said. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. You see the different interviews. We're just here to get drunk. Sure, I might catch the coronavirus, but if I do, I do. And you know why they're saying that? Because you've heard the medical reports. They're thinking, if I catch it, it'll just be like the flu or a cold to me because I'm young and I'm strong and I'm invincible. Because that is often how we think when we're in that age group. But nobody's thinking I'm taking this home to grandma. Because you know what they're really thinking in their heart? Look, I'm fine, I'll be all right. And while they're not verbally saying this, what they're ultimately saying is that if you catch it, that's on you. That's really what they're saying. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We're just going to get drunk. We're just going to do this. And don't you worry. Because all that stuff is the words or are the words of a fool. Look what it says about the wise here. The wise will increase in learning, and we already learned about that. They will attain wise counsel, which is what what's his name? Forrest did. Look at this one. Gathers in the summer and thus acts wisely, meaning they know the winter is coming and they're going to prepare for it. Not like the one guy said, I'm just living for the day. Because if you do that, you're going to be cold. Obeys what they hear. They didn't obey what they hear. Forrest did. So much to the point where a lot of people, that's why we're in this house now, because the last week the governor in New York was pretty much chewing people out. Like, what is it going to take? We told you to go, and you got people just congregating in Central Park having picnics and everything. Because after all, I'm an American, I have a right. And it's not even about that. It's about listening and using wisdom. The fool. And it's not just these, hates knowledge, takes no pleasure in understanding, enjoys wicked schemes, spurns the parent's discipline, speaks perversity. Look at this. You got so much quick tempered, gets himself in trouble with his proud speech, which you saw on those videos. Because somebody went home with that virus. Mocks at sin, is deceitful, brings grief to his parents, commits sexual immorality. And I kind of got a feeling that probably was going on at spring break, right? So there we go. Hello, Monco. Charles Foster back here without the headphones and full screen. We're going to stop right here for the first session for our online adult Sunday school because we covered those first 9 chapters of Proverbs there. And for the next time, we're going to go through the remainder of the book, Lord willing, and we'll go through 10 through 31. So one of the things you can do is start reading through the Proverbs. If you're watching it on the day this video is premiering, which is March the 29th, 2020, then just open up and read Proverbs 29. Certainly, if you're looking at it at another time, whatever day that is, you read that Proverbs. And the way you can do it is a good thing is you can read it in the morning, and then you can see what the Lord lays on your heart. And then at the end of the day, read that same proverb again and really see how you made out. Did you incorporate some of those proverbs that you kind of focused on in the morning into your life, or did you kind of drop the ball? So if there's anything that you had a question about or a comment, you can certainly leave it on the comment page there on YouTube, and I'll try to take a look at it, and maybe we can incorporate that into what we're doing for our next lesson. So we thank you very much. Read your Proverbs, pray on it, read some Psalms too, and stay safe. God bless.